Welcome, everybody. Great to see all of you. Sorry I missed last month. Oh, hold on one second. Let's let her in. I am very, very excited for tonight's Lakeside chat. We have Alissa Momot from Twinstate Technologies, where she is the marketing manager for the last 5 years. Have you had that same position for the 5 years, Alissa?
For the most part. I officially started cleaning out closets, as I think,
That's how most of us start, right? You work your way up.
Yep.
And Alissa was with us back in December and did a cybersecurity chat with us. And before that one had started, we had some time to talk ahead of time, and she was talking about the dark web. And I was so excited and interested in it that I said, would you please do this for us? And she said, absolutely. So here we are today to learn about the dark web, and I'm sure we'll all have lots of questions. So Alissa, I will let you take it away now, and I'm very excited. Here we go.
Awesome. Is it possible to share my screen? Do I need?
So I made you co-host, so you should.
There it is.
Yep, you should be all set.
You got it now.
Perfect. Hi, Kaden.
So hopefully everyone can see my screen now. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much to Clute Wealth for having us here, and thanks for everyone for joining us. So we're going to demystify the dark web a little bit tonight. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. I do have a video here. The way the dark web works, it's kind of a slower network, and with video chatting, it probably wouldn't have worked too well. So in order to avoid a live demo disaster, we've got a recording of us going into the dark web. So without further ado, we'll dive right in. A little bit about Twinstate. We've been here for 50 years. We have clients all over the nation. We're certified WBE, and one of the partnerships that we're really excited about is our partnership with the InfraGard Alliance, which is a private public sector alliance. So we actually work really closely with the FBI and have a lot of conversations, and we're really tightly woven into what's going on with the cybersecurity division in the FBI. So that's been a really exciting partnership for us, and I think for our clients, and hopefully for you as well. So we'll dive into the web. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with this illustration, but basically what this is an illustration of the webs. And I'm not sure if you're all familiar with this, but there is actually multiple different components of the internet. So we actually have the surface web, which is the one that we're most familiar with. We have the deep web, which we're probably familiar with it, even though we don't know we are. And then there's the dark web. So the surface web is public, it's very accessible. The deep web is private, and the dark web is completely anonymous. So we'll start at the top. The public web, anyone can view. There's about 4.5 billion pages and 4% of the web content. And usually you can determine this by .net, .com, .org, and .gov. And a lot of the way that this works is from what we call spiders or robots. And I know this pretty well as our marketer. So when you want Google to have you show up in their search results, you actually have to submit your sitemap to Google. And then these bots come through and they read your website, the back end of your website. So when you ask questions, they're able to pull that information in and provide that relevant result for you. So it's really kind of interesting too. Google's actually kind of ripping people off on the search engine optimization side with their rich snippet results now, which you've probably seen. If you Google POE versus POE plus, we actually own the rich snippet for that. And it actually pulls the definition that we have on our website and presents that to you. So you don't even have to come to our website now to get the answer that you want. But because we have that sitemap, and because of the way that we've structured some of the information on our website, Google's able to really translate that and provide a really smooth experience for the end user. Next, we'll go into the deep web. And the deep web is really interesting because we use it every single day. We really just don't know about it. So the deep web is typically composed of your medical, financial records, and your social media files. It accounts for about 96% of the web. So it really is a really huge part of the internet. And it's 19 to 20 billion pages, as opposed to just the 4.5 billion that's actually on the surface web. So it really is a comprehensive database of information. And typically you can determine whether or not it's part of the surface or the deep web because it requires a username or password. And that makes a lot of sense, because if our login accounts were showing up on Google, it really would not be a very good thing for any of us. We don't want that information readily accessible to other people. And then we have the dark web. The dark web only accounts for 0.01% of the web. It's really interesting. And it's interesting as well. There's a lot of really good things that can come from the deep web or the dark web, sorry. Some also refer to it as the dark net. And I think I could be wrong. I should probably fact check myself on this, but I do believe that the US Navy was actually responsible for creating the dark web. But it is reported that cyber criminals recently netted 1.6 million from selling 239,000 payment cards on the dark web. So that at like a very high level just goes to show that it can be a very profitable place for cyber criminals. So now the videos will start. Hopefully we can hear. If we can't hear, please just let me know and I will try to adjust.
Welcome, this is Peter with Twinstate Technologies and my cohort here, Evan.
Hello.
And we're here to talk a little bit about the darknet. So what exactly is the darknet? What we've got here is that it's a collection of computers in a private network that are all kind of seamlessly connected with each other that change their connections consistently. So your one connection going out may not be the same if you even browse to that same website. This makes it very tough for law enforcement to track if you're trying to do any illegal activity, or even legal activity if you want to stay anonymous. So first, it's very easy to get there. All you have to do is to go to the Tor project and download the browser. It's simply just installing to your computer, double-clicking a link and letting it connect to the Tor. After double-clicking the browser, you're simply brought to a Google search page, as most people are used to. However, we have the difference of how we're actually connected there. I want to bring you to the sessions box, so if you can actually show us the onion that's clicked, that's blinking right there. You can kind of see our circuit for this website. So what you get an idea is what website we're connected to and the routes that we're taking to get to that point. So as you can see, we're going through France, Denmark, and Germany just to get there. We've already connected and loaded up a couple websites here, because what you have to know is that when you're bouncing through as many computers as what you've seen here, all the different relays, the different countries, you're kind of reliant on all of those different computers' internet connections. So whether they're fast or slow, you're subjected to it. So sometimes these websites will take 1, 2, 3 minutes just to load something very basic. Definitely not what you're used to on the surface web.
I think it's interesting too. When I see these ads, it kind of reminds me of when my mom would take me to Vegas when she'd go on business trips as a child, and there was just all the flashy kind of junk all over the place. Does anybody have any questions about that part?
I gotta wonder, so it's one browser that brings you to the dark web?
Yeah, and for disclosure, we don't recommend you go there. We actually have some specific laptops that we call hacker tops that we don't have connected to our networks and stuff, just to make sure that we stay extra secure. I think there are other browsers as well. I think Tor might just be the most prominently used one.
Well, and that's what was, I wrote it down even trying to figure out, well, okay, if the dark web is all illicit stuff, and I'm assuming it is, but maybe you're going to tell us differently, but then why not just shut down if they're the main browser that everybody uses?
Right. And that's interesting. And I'm fact checking myself in my notes. So the dark web was originally created by the US Navy, and it actually is still funded by the US government. So
it's funded by the US government?
Yep. I'm not entirely sure why. I don't know why I haven't looked into that more, because that is a very interesting fact. But
Alissa, if I could just add,
sure.
My understanding, it grew out of DARPA,
Okay.
which also gave birth, of course, to the public sort of web, but basically it grew out of DARPA, which was Defense Act, whatever it stood for. DARPA has been around for a long time, and that is where all of the technology that eventually led to the web came, and then it started subdividing. So it isn't that it was created for nefarious purposes, is my understanding. It's just that it started splitting off into different ways. And yeah, the military, national security still monitor it, but they don't control it because obviously bad things happen there.
Yeah. And I do know that we've looked into some technology. Sorry if you hear moans and groans in the background. I thought I could get rid of my dogs this evening, but I was unsuccessful. But we've looked into technology as well, where they have bots and crawlers that are very similar to what Google uses. And it actually scans the dark web. So I believe, I think it had something to do with Boeing. So they're actually able to go through some of the chat rooms in the dark web now, the FBI and some of the other agencies, and they can actually start to figure out when nefarious things are potentially going to happen. So they're actually going into chat rooms and extrapolating that information to try to use that for, good purposes too. So there's a pretty important reason for our government to still be involved, I think, in monitoring it.
I guess so. Okay.
We'll go on. There's a few more videos. So
Welcome, this is Peter with Twinstate Technologies.
I did the same one again. It was not what I wanted to do. All right.
So what we've loaded here is Torch, which is kind of what we consider the Tor search engine. Here we can search for anything and get relative search results. So Evan searched for passwords, and in here we can see plenty of paid for advertisements kind of related to it, but we can also find related searches regarding passwords. So here, for instance, we have what he's hovering over here, offering my iCloud services. I have EPPB Forensic and Wondershare can get pics, videos, messages, notes, websites. So these are people offering services to get information for you. If we scroll down a little bit more, we have ATM hacks, we have password stealers for sale. So the Zeus mod, which is more than likely the Zeus virus that's been edited. We have SSH brute force script code there that is being available. So this is all available easily and readily on the dark web. So we found a few websites through the Tor search that are somewhat relevant to kind of explain how these illicit ne'er-do-wells go out and try to get into your services or find passwords that have already been cracked, or maybe employ the services of others to have a targeted attack against you. So here we found Hack Partners through the Tor search. And as you scroll down, we can kind of see their spiel here, where they are a group of dedicated and experienced IT people. They have no problems breaking into almost anything. So you can see they have all the web addresses here, or their email addresses that you can email to them with inquiries. You scroll down, and here you go. We have hackers as a service almost here. They can get into your Facebook, your email.
The one that always sticks out to me as well, the CP framing is actually child porn framing. So For a small fee of $500, you can ruin somebody's life and put child porn on their computer and then report them and get them in loads of trouble. So there is a lot of things that you can ask for and find services for on the dark web, which is obviously one of the negatives. Does anybody have any questions about that or comments?
Is anybody else as shocked as I am at how little it costs to do harm? I mean,
and the other side of the coin, I guess, is none of these are guaranteed. So you can be paying for something. I think some groups kind of have like a guarantee that they promote, but you know, it's not really like you're signing a contract and you can hold somebody to it, especially when you don't know who they are. But it is relatively inexpensive to even try. If you really hate somebody that much, I guess it's probably worth the chance. All right.
anybody else have questions, Riyat? No?
We'll keep going.
All right.
We see here, this is a black market guns website. So typically these websites operate near ports, near airports, maybe by, coastal cities. A lot of times what will happen is you have an inside man at these ports and trade, and what will happen is these guns will come in pieces, or they'll smuggle them in, or someone will just turn a blind eye to a certain shipment. So you're paying a decent bit for these black market guns. They're usually unregistered. They're to another country, maybe completely just off the record. I mean, we don't know what has happened to these guns, but I mean, all things considered, this is actually not terribly expensive, and you're getting black market guns. So hidden financial services. So another very popular service that you'll find on the dark web is credit cards. These are all stolen credit cards, Western Union transfers, PayPal transfers, maybe even hacked accounts. People will buy these for cheap, order a ton of stuff on these stolen credit cards, have them drop shipped to another location, and the person whose credit card has usually been stolen really is never on the hook for it, and they get reimbursed, but you get your stuff generally. So it's a win for the hacker, not really a big loss for the person who had their credentials stolen, unless it was, a debit card or something like that. Different story. But this is easy services to these people. Sometimes they'll even order drugs with these credit cards just because then it's in someone else's name, not in theirs. There's a lot of different applicable reasons for using stolen credit cards that we really don't have to go too much into.
Any questions on that part? Pete lives by this stuff. It was really fun watching Pete go through, and he gets so excited about it. He's like, wow, these black market guns it's pretty cheap to have a gun that's not trackable at all. So. I think we have one more video, and then we can get on with some other stuff.
As you see here, you can see that we're on Silk Road, which you may have heard in the news, which is one of the most popular marketplaces on the dark net. You can see here that they are giving you the active price for Bitcoin and many of the other Bitcoin-like currencies, which, if you don't know what Bitcoin is, it is, in a nutshell, a fairly anonymous form of having money. I say fairly because there are methods to track it in one way or another. However, the wallet will not determine who has it. It will not determine what you're spending it on. All it shows is that it's moving wallet to wallet in a certain amount. So on this website, you can buy a number of things, anything from illegal drugs to, as we see here, Dropbox. If you scroll back up, yep, Dropbox database, 68 million records, which include your email and passwords, for $25. So we don't know, how recent these passwords and usernames are, but for $25, someone's probably going to take their bet. We can see an MBA Century with working PayPal, so we can get into an MBA. we can see they have HBO credentials, so you can watch for cheap, Spotify premium accounts, sex tapes of celebrities. I mean, you can buy just about anything on these marketplaces using a fairly anonymous form of payment. At the bottom here, we can see that they have, social security numbers and date of birth for USA, so you're probably paying about $5 a person for a full documentation to impersonate someone, to, I don't know, open up credit card accounts, to scam someone. I mean, once you have all their information, it makes it a little easier to maybe even get into the rest of their accounts, because you have their date of birth, you have social security numbers.
So it's pretty cheap. And this is one of the reasons that we really emphasize using different passwords for different accounts. Because once one database is breached and they're placed on these marketplaces, if you use the same password on multiple accounts, now you've given them access to that information as well, potentially. There's actually one more video. I'm pretty sure it's just one now. Yep. All right.
What we have on this page is the hidden wiki. So this is what most people who go to Tor typically look at first. So the hidden wiki gives you, as a basic user who's never really used the Onion network before, to kind of give you an idea of what is out there. So if we start scrolling down, you can see that, we have our introduction points, which is, this is where you start, this is how you search. Going a little further, you start seeing, again, the basic financial services like what we saw earlier, where you can go buy PayPal accounts, credit card accounts, skimmed cards, that sort of deal. We have your basic commercial services such as guns, fake IDs, looks like diamonds and gold that have probably been stolen. A little further down, you can see domain services, how to get one of your Onion names, how to stay anonymous, and then anonymous email and messaging. So typically these people who are doing services on Tor will have a totally anonymous email service such as Proton Mail, SecMail, that sort of deal. We see that there are even social networks that are based on Tor, so that way you can stay anonymous while still more or less talking to people. And then whistleblowing, which a lot of you know about WikiLeaks, which is where a lot of famous documents have popped up from, such as Edward Snowden, and I think more recently people have been leaking things from the current administration into WikiLeaks. So let's go ahead and pop over. There we go. WikiLeaks submission upload. So this looks like the website you go to upload. You can see here what are your main topics, any URLs, what organizations are there, and what threat to the sources. So they do take into account, for instance, when you're doing a whistleblow, if there is any possible threat to your life or well-being. And there you go.
All right. WikiLeaks is very similar to Wikipedia, so it's interesting to me that they didn't reinvent the wheel at all on that, and they just decided that they were going to basically use the same interface. It's also interesting to me that the dark web seems to be maybe like 10 years behind in terms of website development. They all kind of have that cheesy sort of vibe to them. And I'm not quite sure why that is. I'm sure that'll change in the future. But does anybody have any questions or comments so far?
Anybody before I ask any more questions? And if you're muted and you need me,
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead, Brenda.
Just to go back to what you were talking about Bitcoin. So there's that, I think it's called fungible art now, that is, people buy images of art, and there, even some galleries store those images, and it's purchased with Bitcoin. So does that make it not a good thing to do anything that you buy or sell with Bitcoin?
No, and there's actually several different kinds of cryptocurrencies. One that's been rather popular in the last few months, thanks to Elon Musk, which I think this is like a debatable thing of what he's doing, is the Dogecoin, which was actually kind of a joke at first. I don't know if you're familiar with the Doge at all. I wish I knew what type of dog he was. He's like a super fluffy dog, and they put his face on a coin, and they call it a Dogecoin. Elon Musk was highly promoting that and sort of fluctuating the value of the coin, which kind of seems like it might be illegal to do, but it's not yet. But using those forms of currency, there's nothing wrong with it. I think the biggest thing with those is I don't think there's really nothing wrong with it. I think it's actually a really good opportunity in terms of an investment at this point, even still with how high they are compared to what they were before.
I'm asking because someone in the family is involved with an artist who makes that kind of art. And there's a whole discussion in the art world of, should we sell our stuff like that or not? Or is it a bad thing to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I'm sure that there are people in the world that will figure out a way to make it a negative thing for everyone else that's taking advantage of that right now.
So I'm going to step in here and just do a compliance disclosure, because from how we got to securities and cryptocurrency, the opinions expressed by anybody here do not represent LPL Financial, who's our broker dealer, or Clue Wealth Management. And we cannot give any advice on any of those things that were just discussed. So let's go from there and keep on.
As far as I know, and I probably should have said that, to my knowledge, there's nothing in terms of owning them that would be, you know, it's not illegal.
Yes, I would just add that, Brenda, because I think it might have been a little confusing. Bitcoin is one of many cryptocurrencies. It's entirely legitimate. It's used on the stock market. It's traded it's everywhere. It's just that the dark web uses it also because it is so difficult to trace.
Yep.
That's why they just sort of adopted it, just like they adopted a number of other things because it made it easier for them.
Gotcha.
Any other questions out there? So I've got one then. Some of us sign up for monitoring services for names or social security numbers, passwords, things like that. Do those services monitor the dark web?
I would have to look into each one specifically, because everyone has a different type of technology behind it, right? So we're actually evaluating, we have a monitoring service that we use for our clients at Twinstate that's based off of the domain. So at twinstate.com, and it crawls through different chat rooms and things like that. And if it finds that information, any of our domains out there, it actually pulls in that information and alerts us immediately. In terms of like, I think it's Experian that might have one now, dark web monitoring. I don't know exactly if they're going into the chat rooms and they're pulling that information out, or if it's just based off of, hey, you've had sort of a new inquiry or whatever that might be. But there definitely are technologies out there that will actually go into the chat rooms and look for your information, your name, your email address, and all those things.
Interesting. And what is the Onion network?
The Tor? Yeah, so the Onion and the Tor, I think that's just the logo. I don't know, maybe because there's so many layers, they thought that was kind of a nice thing to use. I'm not actually sure why they picked that name, but yeah.
Okay. Any other questions out there?
Are there other practices or services that you would recommend, Alissa, to basically protect us from being picked up and resold, other than, it's disclosed. For instance, if your credit card account is hacked, they're required to tell you now.
Right.
This is a good example of why they're required to tell you, but.
Yeah, I think in terms of, things that you can do, and it is pretty complicated. If there's, I'll actually do some digging after this and send it over so they can share it to you and see if there's any cybersecurity awareness trainings that are out there for free and available. Because really, a lot of it comes from obviously having different passwords for everything that you use. So for example, for myself and my own sanity and not writing things on sticky notes and losing them and having to reset my password every 2 seconds, I use a password manager. So one that's popular that's out there is LastPass. So that'll actually, LastPass. And there's quite a few others that are out there too. I think LastPass just changed their subscription, so I think it actually costs more money now, but there should be some free ones out there. Another thing to be very careful of is spam. Actually, I can go through this because I have a few examples of some phishing emails that have come through, which has where's my computer's running slow? Here, I will share this. So being very, very careful when you get emails is very important. So we actually do stuff at Twinstate for our training purposes, where our sysadmin, who is the gentleman that was speaking in those videos, will send us emails that simulate a phishing email. So it kind of gets us in the mindset of checking for things that may look legitimate, but they don't, or they're not. So just being ultra weary of emails. One thing that I do, somehow I've gotten signed up with FedEx alerts, and even when I don't know packages are being sent to me, I get notifications that they're in transit or they're going to be delivered, which ruins any surprise. So that's a whole nother thing. But anytime I get one of those notifications, especially if I don't know I'm expecting a package, I'll take that tracking information that they send in that text message or that email, and I'll take that number, the code or whatever it is, and I'll go straight to FedEx's website and I'll put that information in there just to make sure that that's not an illegitimate link. Because often what happens, so if this comes into your email account, if you click on that track your package button, it'll actually take you to a page that is very, very similar to what Amazon's login page or information page would be. So it's very hard. And then what they'll do is they typically simulate the login page, and they'll have you try to log in a couple times, and then they'll reroute you after a failed attempt back to the legitimate Amazon site, so that you don't necessarily feel like you've been at an illegal site. And they've gotten really good about it. Before, it was a little bit easier to tell because typically those pages wouldn't have a lock in the corner. So you have the SSL certificates most websites have. So that they used to sort of say not secure and have that kind of flag. Now they're paying for the SSL certificate. So it's a little bit harder to tell that those websites are not legit. But being very, very careful, especially if you get any of these, which typically around the holidays, they really ramp this type of email up to try to catch people just in the rush of the holidays and trying to get all their gifts delivered. I have to check into personal email filtering as well. I've checked into my Gmail account, and I think they actually do a pretty good job of filtering this stuff and putting it into your spam. But there are a couple that slip through. So just being, again, really, really careful about misspellings or anything that looks out of place. And if you feel like it's out of place, or if somebody sent you an email that you weren't expecting, try to pick up the phone or go to that site directly. That's a really good,
Yeah, I hit delete a lot.
yeah. And reporting them as spam too. Anytime that I see something that comes through and it's not legitimate, I report it. And then hopefully that, I think it kind of brings a teamwork picture into it, because it's, you know, kind of how Google operates. The more that we report something as spam, they put it into a category, so then other people can't get exposed to that. So anytime that you know that something's not legitimate, I would go ahead and report it as spam too, so that way it gets caught for other people.
And
I'm amazed at how clever they are, because I've gotten actually a bank log on and it looks just like my bank. And then they try to reel you in by re-enter your password so that they want to get you. But
Yep. And anytime that you do that, it's, you know, I don't think it's an immediate thing that you know, they're gonna, because I'm, you know, typically they send these emails out at mass, right? They'll get a list of email addresses from somewhere and they just flood people with that email. And they're taking their chances that they're gonna get somebody hook, line, and sinker to fill out that form of the login information. So if you do think that you've done that, if you have any feeling, just go ahead and go right to that site. Like if it was Amazon, go right to Amazon and reset your password. And then that way, any of that information that they've exfiltrated from you will no longer be legitimate. And we actually do see that too on some of our dark web reports. Even if the email addresses and the passwords that are being used, which we call credentials, they'll still come up in our report. But we have we know that they haven't been able to use those credentials because we changed our passwords right away. So anytime you think you might have slipped up, just go ahead and change your password and your information. Another thing that I see happening a lot that really kind of freaks me out, and I try to bring this up as often as I can. If anyone's on Facebook or any sort of social media, you've probably seen the surveys around that say, tell me about when you were born and what your high school mascot was, or what your favorite candy is. And a lot of those questions that are posed in those surveys are also the questions that you would use to reset your password. So that information that you're putting out on the internet, I think, as long as you're not using those answers anywhere for your security preferences to reset any credentials, you can do that. But I would be very, very cautious in filling any of those out and giving anyone your information freely.
yeah, I got one this morning that said, what was the first car you drove? And when a lot of people look for searches, they go through a service called Nexus Lexus. And Nexus knows, you know, where you lived, your former addresses, what vehicles you've driven. They know lots about you.
Yep.
So you're just really helping them crack cloning you and stealing your identity.
Yep.
And it's done in a very clever way. It's like you're playing a game, fill in the name. The other thing I'll add is we've used LastPass before. We recently switched to Keeper.
Yep.
We like Keeper because it's cloud-based, so I can pick up my numbers on my cell phone, on my computer, no matter where I am.
Yeah, and
It's all
that
encrypted.
was one of the things that LastPass just changed, I think, because I had it, not the business account, so I don't know if that's different at all, but my personal account, and they started to say, hey, you can only either access LastPass on your computer or on your cell phone, but you have to choose which one you're going to use. So
The business account includes, it's totally cloud-based, and it includes all devices you have.
Oh, really? Okay. We kind of like the setup of Keeper. It's a little easier how it stores data.
I think there's several good ones. I think the important thing is to use it, and use it, you know, regularly.
Yep. And one thing I would suggest as well, if you are obviously you have a master password that you have to remember to access that. And the same thing goes, because you can save your passwords for websites within your browser. I don't recommend doing that. If you can get a password manager, that's better. And then also making sure that you're filling out your master password anytime that you're using your computer, just in case. I don't want to say anything too strongly. I don't think that computer takeovers are quite what they used to be. I remember being a kid and having viruses and somebody was taking control of your mouse, which certainly still happens today. And actually happened at a water plant in Florida a few months ago. But in case that were to happen, you don't want to save any of your passwords in your browser, and you want to make sure that master password doesn't automatically fill out for that that password manager. So that way, if somebody does end up taking over your computer, they don't have access to all that information. It is a very powerful tool. It's a very handy tool. I love it. But if you give them the keys to the castle, and they can get in easily, they're going to do that.
If people have allowed Google to save the passwords for the ease and weren't aware of that, how do they delete those saved passwords from the Google when you just say save it? What do you recommend is a good protocol to delete those? Because if people aren't aware and they save them, then they're easily going to get access.
Yes. So depending on what password or what browser you're using, it should be in the settings, and you should be able to delete your passwords.
I mean, I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
The other thing I've done,
export them too, so
you're right, it's right there. I mean, I don't try not to save passwords in
yeah, and
there anyway, so
it can be pretty inconvenient, and I think that's why password managers are really, really great, because they help you keep track of all of your logins, which I have so many, it's ridiculous. And then you can have complex passwords. So I guess that's another topic for conversation as well, would be constructing your passwords in the NIST, so the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They have created sort of these guidelines for people to follow so that they can stay more secure. And one of them used to be you should reset your password. I think it was like every 30 days. And they've changed it now. As long as you have some sort of dark web monitoring or whatever set up, that you don't have to do that until you know that there's an exposure. And password managers certainly help people do that. And then Debbie, my mother, always brings up, when you're making your passwords, and it used to be, and depending on what website you're on, they'll say you need this many special characters, and you have to have a capital and a lowercase, and it has to be at least 18 letters. But whatever those combinations are, try to think of something you see, something you know, something that is easily remembering for you. So hopefully this isn't an active password anymore. One of mine used to be, I hate fall. And I don't think I actually hate fall, but it was just something that the fall was outside, hate was a random word, and then I just take a couple of special characters and throw them in kind of in places, so using an @ sign instead of an A, that sort of thing. So trying to think of phrases, and especially if you're using a keyword manager or password manager, sorry, that's something to help you remember that master password.
and those programs also have the ability to generate a password for you, which I've used, but you know, there's more characters than looks like alphabet in there.
Yeah, it can be pretty overwhelming.
Does anybody ever still use a Rolodex for their passwords?
Sitting on their desk. Look at Debbie's raising her hand.
I'm a Rolodex, but it's like a little index card box, like you put recipes in or whatever. I have a different card for each one.
Yeah, I always remember, I mean, I remember Rolodexes used to be a major thing. The only difficulty is, of course, in a situation with multiple people, basically it exposes it to anyone who comes into your home.
Yeah.
It would just take a moment to take a look. And I can remember in the very, very early days at Vermont Law School, we had an instance where someone in our cleaning service
Wow.
was checking things on desktops and all.
Huh.
Now that's a smart person. So Alissa, is there more to the presentation? Or are we just in the question and answer? I should have asked you that.
No, I'm just trying to pull up stuff that I've got in this deck that I think are relevant to talk about. Certainly if people have things that they want to talk about and address, if I can answer them, and if I can't, I can certainly talk to some of the text that I've placed and get some answers. But I just thought it was worth bringing up that during COVID, spamming and phishing and vishing and all sorts of other attacks have been increasing, and this was one of the things that was brought up, was the that, like, even on the dark web you can sell things that are legitimate. So these are face masks, and they had them for sale on the dark web. So it's not always necessarily just because it's illegal it's going to be on the dark web. I think this was just, they saw an opportunity, and it was a pretty profitable opportunity potentially for them, and they took advantage of it. So and there's also, I think, this one, the next one, yes. And this was just, they spoofing the World Health Organization and a couple of other very prominent groups, well-known groups. So you really can't trust anything when it comes to a lot of this stuff anymore. So if there is anything, even if they look legitimate, it actually is, I need to figure out how to do it. So the InfraGard organization, the Albany InfraGard, if you go to their website, you can't actually copy and paste any of their logos or anything off of it, which I think they do for a good reason, because like the World Health Organization, you could go on their website and you could copy and paste their image into an email and create something like this rather easily. So they've gotten very good at making things seem legitimate, except for this minor misspelling, which if you're in a haste or you're really worried about something, you might skip over it, and that's what they really hope for. So I just thought that was a good example of another relevant phishing attempt. But I think that's about all I have for the information in the slide deck.
So if somebody went on to the dark web and they ordered those N95 masks, would they get on some kind of list, you would think, that would then be monitored because they're out there? Or, you know, it's like, hey, I'm on the dark web, so okay, why is this person now on there that wasn't there before?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it really has to be based off of intentions, and the purpose of the dark web is that it's anonymous. So even though there are technologies and there's ways for government agencies to sort of put the pieces together, it really is pretty anonymous. So it's very, very difficult to figure out who is doing what and when. And that was sort of what Pete was illustrating when he first connected to the browser. You could see that I think it was Denmark, France, and Germany were the countries that he went through. So that kind of helps. And it's a similar technology to a VPN, which I would also recommend for people to use. There's some cheap ones out there. I think the one that I use is ExpressVPN for my apartment. And what that helps to do is that actually kind of creates a tunnel for your information to go through from point A to point B to make sure it stays secure. So anytime that you're at a coffee shop and using free Wi-Fi, which I don't recommend, it's safer to use your phone as a hotspot if you can. But anytime you're doing any shopping of any kind, it really is good to have a VPN on. And with the VPN, you can sort of do the same thing. So if I want to pretend that I'm living in Seattle, Washington, I can actually change my IP address to make it look like I'm in Seattle, Washington, and I'm not in Plattsburgh, New York, which is a totally legal thing to do. But so the dark web is kind of using sort of a more powerful version of a VPN to help protect people's identities.
Fascinating. Oh, Brenda, are you asking a question? You're muted.
What is VPN, Alissa?
VPN is an acronym for Virtual Private Network.
Oh, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions out there?
I'll make a comment. I also think it's not a bad idea because it's so easy to get spoofed with a fake email. And a lot of people get hacked, and you'll get an email from a friend with something attached, and it's really not from your friend because they've spoofed it. I think it's really important not to click on those. The other thing I've done is I have put a lock on my credit report so that they can't open any more bogus credit cards. I think the dark web has so much access to information that if they happen to get a hold of yours, it's one more potential safety feature you can do to prevent them from getting access to your credit.
Yeah, I think it was $5 for one record of PII that include your first name, last name, date of birth, social security number. So it is relatively cheap to steal someone's identity. That's a good point. Yeah, anytime anybody sends you an email, whether you were, I mean, typically, if you're expecting the email, I feel like it might be safe. But if it's a random email out of the blue, my grandfather sometimes forwards me some messages and I'm not sure about them. So I'll call him up and make sure that this is an email thread that is legitimate, and just double check and make sure that it is. So if you do click on that attachment or link or whatever, it's not a bad thing.
I delete them and ask questions later.
Hey, that's extra safe.
And one of the things
Send it to me again if you want me to see it.
Similarly is I set on the emails, the type that Alissa was showing, I set all of my email addresses to show the full email address, in addition to just the name. So it wouldn't come from Pat Heffernan, it would show the full email address to whomever is sending it underneath. And that's usually, to me, very quickly, the fastest way to figure out it's a spoof, particularly if it's someone I deal with regularly, because instead of either the business or my Gmail account, it'll have misspelling or it'll have a new word in it. So instead of Amazon, the Amazon thing, it won't come from Amazon.com.
Yep.
It'll come from something else.
Yep, that's a really good point. And we've had that happen at Twinstate where, and I think we've sort of figured out how to reduce spoofing. At least some of our email security measures just strip those out so we don't have the opportunity to click on them anyways. But at one point, somebody had spoofed my mother's email address. So she's the CEO of Twinstate Technologies, and she had asked one of our accounting folks for a wire transfer of a certain amount of money. And luckily, we had done enough training that this individual knew that it wasn't a common request from my mom. So she ended up calling my mom and was like, "Hey, you want me to wire money? This is different." And she's like, "No, I don't want you to do that." So that's a very good point, because it is very easy to spoof email addresses and make them seem like they're legitimate. Similarly to that point, any URLs or anything or buttons, if you hover over those, they typically will tell you whether or not it's going to the legitimate address. So it might be Amazon.com with a period between A, M, and the last of it. So that's a very good point.
Any last questions out there? Dolores, any questions?
I'm scared.
I think that's the overall arching theme here. It's very scary.
There's too many scary things on there.
Yeah. There's definitely things that you can do to protect yourself. And if you're no longer using a website or a login or a service, you know, make sure that you delete your account and remove your information from that site. Another suggestion I would do to keep your credit card information safe, with any recurring expenses or subscriptions like that, you can use sort of those throwaway Visa cards or whatever, and use those so that way if somebody gets access to your account, they don't get access to your credit card information as well.
Were you just talking about those virtual credit card numbers?
Yeah, so I use those, like those Visa gift cards that you can buy.
Because I know that I get emails from Capital One saying that you have the ability now to use a virtual card number each time you do purchases, so that it's a different one each time, and it's not something that allows them access should that number get released. And I was wondering if that was a good, safe. It's saying it's safe, but you never know.
Yeah.
You do that, Christina?
I'm sorry, what, Dolores?
You do that? Did you use that?
I have not used it yet. I am thoroughly looking into it.
Well, I've been thinking about it myself, but I'm not sure. I know every time I make a purchase, Capital One will text me or send me a message if they think I did not do it, you know, or if it's from a different place or a different country or something. So, but I was thinking about that myself, so.
Yeah, and for Capital One and probably for most credit cards, you can get set up with notifications. So it's kind of sad, but my husband probably thinks I keep a close eye on him, because as soon as he uses the credit card, it comes across my phone, and I'm like, what are you doing at such and such? He can't buy me gifts without me knowing, apparently. And it'll tell me exactly how much was spent. And it's a safety issue though, because just in case something were to happen, I'm always aware of when the credit cards are being used.
You can also set up your bank accounts with notifications for, transactions or certain limits. I have one of my bank account that sends me a notification when somebody logs on. And I know it's me that does it, but I always get that notification. I find it helpful.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a good point too. That another thing I've forgotten to talk about is two-factor authentication. So a lot of banks will do, you log in, they send you a text message. Facebook has a two-factor authentication method now, Gmail. So there's a lot of organizations that are implementing that technology, and some people give you the option to take advantage of the technology, and others kind of force your hand on it and say you need to use this in order to protect yourself. So anytime you have the opportunity to use two-factor authentication, I absolutely would recommend that.
So I know we're at 6:30 and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but Peter, I saw you put on your headphones. Does that mean you have a question?
I did have a question, and all of a sudden my phone wasn't working. So for some reason I could hear, but I couldn't ask a question. Anyhow, yeah, my question was about, I believe you mentioned that even in a public setting with Wi-Fi using VPN, you wouldn't feel safe using the public Wi-Fi. I was curious about that.
Yeah, and that could be a whole discussion. And honestly, technically, it's a little over my head, but like the most basic knowledge that I have of it. So often, I won't say often, but what some hackers will do is they'll actually set up networks that are exactly the same as the network that's showing in the coffee shop. So you can't distinguish which one is the legitimate one versus isn't.
Okay. Yeah.
And for example, with my limited technological abilities, which is really subpar compared to most people that work at Twinstate, but I can log into my router here and I can see every device that's on my network, what websites they're visiting, and all sorts of information. And then I do believe that there is a way for them to sort of get onto your laptop, or at least view the data that's going from one site to the other. So even if you have a VPN, if they're able to get access on your side, that information going through the tunnel isn't going to be secure because they're intercepting it at the beginning.
I see. Thanks.
I know, Peter, from our perspective, that from day one, we have not been allowed through our industry to use public Wi-Fi. We have to use our own data on our phone or use our phone as a hotspot. But public Wi-Fi is a no-no completely.
No.
Yeah, because they can hijack you.
Yeah.
We got a request from a client to wire money, same deal. So
They've been good the whole time, Melissa.
The benefits of living in a third floor where people come in.
He saw Debbie petting my dog, who really wants me to take her out. So I think that's what that was all about.
Like the dogs are already knowing it's time to go, people.
Yeah.
We could talk about this. See, this is the problem, Melissa, is that each time you guys come on, we want more information. And so you're going to get another request.
It's good. That's what what we're here to do. It really is an important aspect of all of our lives now, and we really appreciate the opportunity to talk to people and help spread the knowledge and keep everyone a little bit secure.
I think that's a very good point, is spreading that knowledge gives us a little bit more to protect ourselves with.
Yep. In business and in personal life. So my mom always tells the story of a war vet who was a very kind man, and he got taken advantage of. Another thing to be careful of is people asking if you need IT support or help on your computer or whatever. Don't take them up on that, because I think he ended up paying them a significant amount of money, and his family wouldn't have found out about it if the financial institution didn't break some laws, unfortunately, but they were doing it in the best interest of the gentleman who was losing hundreds of thousands of dollars with that group. So it's anytime anybody asks you if you need IT help, we try to make sure that people know that too when we're trying to help them at Twinstate. If we're logging onto their computers, they know that it's us calling and not some other organization pretending to be us. So that's a big issue too.
Yeah. I saw, Susan, your reaction there, the horrified, like, oh my gosh. So, all right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. And I'm sure if you have any more questions that Alissa would be happy to send. If I have to send them to her and get an answer, let us know. And thank you so much, Alissa, for being here tonight and talking with us and sharing all of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. This was
Thank
great.
you.
Great. So
Thank
interesting.
you.